Hi, welcome to another edition of Education Matters. I'm Ray Pinney. I'll be your host for this afternoon's program. With me is Dr. Robyn Klim from the Lawrence Township School District. She's the superintendent. And Tom Eldridge, who's the business administrator from Lawrence Township. We'll be talking about school budgets. If you have a question you're watching live on Facebook, X, or one of our social media platforms, just put it in the box and I'll pass it on to Robyn and Tom. So, it's that time of year, January.
It is.
We have budgets that we're assembling. I know you've been working on. This wasn't day one of your budget,
No.
Tom. I know you work all the time. So, what's the base for a budget? Do you start from last year's budget? Do you look at your curriculum? How do you, in Lawrence Township, start and look at a budget?
It's a great question. And so establishing the base is something that we do. We do that together. And we agree that we are going to take the current year's budget and cost it out 1 year forward. And so what that means is we want to know what our budget in 24-25 looks like in 25-26 before we start building in new initiatives. And so we begin with sometime around the second payroll in October. What we'll start to do is build our position control roster for the following year. As everyone on the podcast knows, that about 80% of our budget is salary and benefits. And so what we do is we move our staff forward 1 year. We project our benefits forward 1 year, and we do that on the each, which means we'd use what we call a zero-based budget. So we don't incrementally increase people. We look and we verify every single human being, where they are on their respective salary guides. And then we plot forward their new salary and their indirect compensation, such as their health benefits, right down through pension costs and Social Security. And then we do the same type of thing with our tuition, our out-of-district tuition. And so we establish our base budget. And then what we do is we look at what are our initiatives and what will they cost us over and above our base budget. But with that, as a complement to the initiatives, we always ask ourselves the question, well, what are things that we don't want to do any longer? Because we have to make time in the day for our new initiatives. And so we have to make room for them. And so that's where we begin, sometime around the first or second payroll in October.
And Robyn, Tom talked about some of the educational aspects of that.
Yes.
Is that part of your communication with the business office that I think we'll be looking at this next year, or the changes that you anticipate?
So let me just start by saying every district has a strategic plan in place. My goals with the board are developed, in concert with what we're looking to achieve for the school year.
Mm-hmm.
Tom and I always have sort of our lens on through every committee that meets with the board. What are our goals? So there's always, at the top of the finance budget, it's the superintendent and the board's goals, so that we remain focused on what we're doing here. With that said, any new initiative that comes in, we're having conversations about how will this meet our goals and objectives that we've set forth. We have a responsibility to our constituents and to the Board of Education to do a mid-year check-in on our goals. And that's how we kind of stay checks and balances with one another. We're in constant communication from that October payroll. How are things looking as the budget is built out? What staffing do we need to achieve those goals? That's usually the biggest ticket item.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll back into some of the granular aspects of the budget with curriculum needs, supplies, time, schedules, that type of stuff.
So I guess one of the things, particularly if you're a new board member, is that the budget is kind of a year long. It's not a,
Right.
I said it's the budget time of the year, and
Yes.
it is, but it's not. It's something that is a working document throughout the course of the year.
Yes.
You're looking back, you're looking forward.
We look back, we look forward, and then during the year, as we have our committee meetings, Robyn and I routinely talk with one another and explore the ideas. So if you're someone who's mentioned an idea to us and you've said that, and you're a policymaker on our board, you're a board member, and this is something that's a board goal, we're going to be working on that all year. We're going to be looking for opportunities to fund that initiative. If it aligns with, of course, our student needs, the superintendent's goals, the board goals, and we're always looking for a way to become more effective. But we're also looking for a way to circle back to you. So if you're a board member and you mention something in committee, in our instruction committee, for example, that cycles back to the finance committee. And so we mention in our finance committee meeting what happens in the curriculum committee. And you might want to talk about that, how that happens, because that way we don't lose track of the good ideas. Meanwhile, we're cataloging those ideas. We don't just catalog them in March or bring them out in March. We're talking about them all year, those things that you as a policymaker have mentioned.
I think the beauty of how we run our committees in Lawrence Township is that there's always a referral to another committee. I try to get to all the committee meetings so that I can kind of stay in tune to everything that's happening across the district. But the other thing that our board president, Michelle Bose, feels that it's super important is that the board committee chairs get together. So we're starting to develop a process where the committee chairs get together so that they can make sure that we're on the same page, messaging is being received, and that we're not missing, an opportunity to fulfill a goal or to discuss financing around a goal, or if there's a curriculum change or decision. Sometimes that needs to bleed back and it may affect the different committees. And I'll give you an example. We're going out for a big bond referendum vote March 11th. So there has been this need for the committee chairs to get together and really talk about the financial aspects, the curricular aspects, the personnel needs coming down the pike, and the community messaging around all of that. So I think we have a great system in place to make sure that we are working and constantly in communication with one another. That just makes us a stronger team.
Yeah, so it seems like the board's role is not just like a finance committee. It's all the committees are kind of working together.
Yes.
And because there's always a financial impact on almost any decision you make at a local school.
And they
district.
really value that feedback loop. If there's something going on in finance and we transfer it to the curriculum committee because we need to make further decisions, and then we come back to finance maybe, for a funding need, that reciprocal, communication loop is so important to continuing to discuss the budget, and it keeps us focused on our vision and mission of what we're doing.
And I see that like goal setting seems to be, your goals are included as a superintendent, and the board's goals are part of that budget process.
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
I want to say something that's unique that happens with our board members, and that is this: in all of our committees, if a person is unable to attend, there's always another board member who is eager to fill in. So that helps with the communication too. And the point of my interjecting that is communication is the key in managing expectations. And so our board does that within themselves. They don't use our communication in terms of we being liaisons, me to finance and my counterparts to the curriculum committee. They themselves take that responsibility on and they say, I'm not going to be able to make it. Is anyone else interested in meeting on the XYZ committee and who can fill in? And usually there's more than one person who wants to be in attendance. And that's enormous with respect to achieving goals and keeping communication open. I just wanted to put that in there.
No, from my experience working with boards and administration, communication is the key.
It's the key.
Because when people don't, it builds trust.
Yes.
So if people don't feel they're getting all the information,
That's right.
then things tend to fall apart. I just want to do some mechanics on it. I mean, you made it sound so easy. We just look at all the numbers from last year.
No.
And there's some, it's not easy. You have a 2% property tax.
Yes.
It's not on the whole budget. We should probably emphasize that, particularly for new board members.
Yes.
You have a cap, but you have a lot of things that are probably going a little more than 2%. You probably have your teacher's contract.
Yes.
You probably have fuel costs.
Yes.
A lot of, it's high inflation. So how do you balance those needs?
The first, I think, is to know where you are accurately. And so when we do our payroll or our position control roster, we do a very detailed deep dive. So we actually have our people in the business office go to the schools and do a complete inventory of staff, making sure that people are in the exact right position that they say. And that, for example, instructional assistants, if you were formerly a special education instructional assistant, are you still there? Are you in another area? And so we know our staff first, know thy resources. So we go right to the school. In addition to that, and so we do build from the ground up. That's the most important thing. We understand when someone's going to retire or scheduled to retire so that we have an idea of our breakage. But your question goes to a broader a topic of how do you, within a 2% cap, accommodate transportation costs escalating at 5% and out-of-district tuition perhaps at 8 or 10, depending on where your children are attending. And so what we find ourselves with is each one of our districts, we're savvy, we're unique, we're on the ground trying to make things work. So people will do any number of things to fill those holes. So some of us will go out and we'll look at modifying our energy usage by using geothermal or solar. These are one-time deals because after that it's built into the budget and that savings is built in. Maybe you self-insure, but after you've self-insured once, your cap is going to catch you eventually. These are all one-time things that can happen, or perhaps you outsource something, whether it's your food service or your transportation or your instructional assistance. And so what you're doing is the savings are built in the subsequent year. And so once you've done that, now we have more of a structural concern with what happens. And so after you've moved all around the fringes, eventually what occurs is your salaries and benefits growing at, for argument's sake, 5% are going to catch you on a 2% cap because you can only cut around the edges and find the savings in those other areas, typically one time. And then they're all built in. So now what we're talking about is a need for change that's more structural in education as a whole and not just what districts have done.
Okay. I mean, I'm not great at math, but when things are going up 5-8%, you have a 2% cap. Something has to give somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
And I like your idea of looking for those savings.
There's also creativity within the curriculum side. You know, you look at special education programs. I mean, I think we're one of those districts that has cut the out-of-district costs significantly because we have very savvy, very, very talented educators looking to build those programs from within to really service students so that they don't need to, necessarily go to a placement outside the district. We're trying to build a continuity of care for children that come in medically impacted, children that have certain needs that require us to hire that staffing, and we want them in our school community. We want to embrace them. So over the years, when we look back at what we've done to kind of look at some cost savings, it benefits our kids because now they belong in our school community and we're building that infrastructure to make sure that that's our sentiment. They matter to us.
So that's what I'm getting. And this is something that you're continually doing, looking at ways to save
All the time.
money,
Always.
just educationally and other.
Yeah, I think what we do is, and we can rattle off some things that my colleagues in other districts and we have done. We've had people, school districts who have reduced their ongoing energy bills by 25%, putting solar on their roofs, or perhaps going through geothermal. Other districts have restructured their transportation so that they have more than 1 or 2 tiers, which changes school times. And of course, the byproduct of that is people are not necessarily happy with how early they have to have their children at bus stops and how late they get home. Again, you have any number of districts that have outsourced non-critical, mission-critical things. And what I mean by that is, your core competency is instruction. You don't outsource that. So typically what you do is you look around the outsides and say, what can we do? And of course, all of us for many years now have long since gone past this notion of cooperative pricing and purchasing. We're all there already. And so then what we do is we look to things that are more pragmatic and say to ourselves, can we run that transportation route more efficiently ourselves? But I think sometimes, and certainly we have done this, we were a district where we had 155 students out of district. Now we have 65 students out of district. And sometimes districts will find that because of enrollment decreasing, they can use that space and bring students back into district, improving the lives of many students who were once spending an hour on a bus going one way and then an hour coming back. And so there's a benefit to the human being the student. If we can design that program, and we can, and there's a financial benefit to that as well. And so when we said that we reevaluate our initiatives and we do that on an ongoing basis, we indeed do that. And it's not just October where it starts, it's all year long.
Mhm.
And our colleagues in other school districts are fantastic because we speak with them and we get good ideas. And we might not be able to replicate
Yeah.
exactly what one another do. We might say, well, we have a little bit of a different need. And we work with one another as well.
We've
So
gotten very savvy with
Yeah.
shared services. You know, we have some of our students within Mercer County going to another school district within our county, but they're not an hour away. They just happen to have a niche that really served our student, and that's where we looked first. So I think that we're always looking at revenue generation. How can we build a program that may be attractive to our other constituents so that we can run it and possibly have some revenue coming in? I think that we've been savvy to do some shared services, whether it be jumping on transportation routes for shared costs. I think there's just always that network and collaboration across the board, from your transportation director to athletics, with those conversations with buses and running times for sports and you name it. I mean, it really runs the gamut and it takes all hands on deck. But the point is, it's a collaborative process all year round. Does it feel a little tight right now as far as the momentum of the budget build? Absolutely. But we are always talking about ways to do things better.
Two things, but I'll go to one cost driver, I guess, that is relatively new.
Mhm.
And that's like the staffing shortage,
Mhm.
teacher shortage,
Yes.
bus drivers,
Mhm.
Yes.
substitutes.
Mhm.
You mentioned the word breakage area. That probably is a little harder to come by now than it was, say, 6 or 7 years
Shrinking.
ago. And for those who maybe explain what
Mhm.
breakage is when
Mhm.
you were, for those who are newer board members on this.
Certainly, if you have a longtime valued staff member who's highly effective and they are going to retire and they're at the top of the guide. So their salary is built into your base budget. It's already part of what your anticipated revenue is. And then you hire someone, let's say you hire someone at the first step of the guide. So the differential there may be $40,000. That $40,000 that's already built in is breakage. And when people ask, well, how do you afford salary increases in multiples of 2%, your cap? Well, you can afford that because you have the breakage. The breakage from the person leaving helps fund the increases for those people who stay. But the phenomenon I think that you're getting at is no longer are we able to find many people coming in at the bottom of the guide. And so we're finding them at the middle of the guide, which is consuming our breakage. And it's squeezing our cap more and more.
Absolutely.
And then we couple that with the idea of a supply and demand problem with the supply of teachers. And I think that's something that we began to see in the COVID years. And there's ways to influence supply, and there's also ways to influence demand. But those aren't things that are within the control of school districts. Those are the constraints that we live in. And so we can affect the demand somewhat, we can affect the supply somewhat, but when demand is set up by learning standards that we have to meet, well, our demand is driven by those things. And when supply is based on the number of students who are coming through the colleges, and that is decreasing, it's hard for us in a single school district to influence that supply. It's a much greater macroeconomic phenomenon than one school district out of 500 in New Jersey can accommodate. We can do things individually, such as attract teachers, and we can appeal to their needs with our unique offerings. But when there are fewer and fewer teachers in the pool to try to attract, that makes it very difficult for us.
So you, as a superintendent, you steal from another superintendent.
However, to mitigate that, on the flip side, we are in year 2 of preschool expansion aid. We have an early childhood growth and development class that is bolstering at
There you
our
go.
high school. We are essentially building our own pipeline, building up these teachers, you know, growth and development class 1, class 2. They go into our preschool classrooms, which we have one now full time at the high school for them to access, go in, do their learning plans together with the kids, do the lesson plans. They get to run their high school curriculum. They get the experience on demand right there during the high school day. Our students love it. And then they go to college, and the hope is that they will return having had such a great experience teaching and learning within our, you know, within our brick and mortar. So I think that our jobs have become beyond,
Mhm.
building the budget. We are looking at recruitment. We are looking at the pipeline of teachers.
Mhm.
We are establishing, TCNJ and Ryder and other colleges, Mercer County. We're always looking at ways to bring students back in for, their teaching experiences. We want to be that attractive district. So we're not in this, pitting one district against the other.
So you're making yourselves a little bit more attractive to those new people coming up.
That's
To
right.
try to build opportunity. Absolutely.
Your
Yeah.
competitive advantage for a single school district is based on your initiative.
Mhm.
So you had asked the concept of substitute teachers are difficult to get. We were early on, we saw this coming, and we made sure we locked in as many substitutes as we could every single day. And by doing that, we were able to find our substitute teachers, and hopefully we provided them with some measure of stability. And why I said it's structural and more of a macroeconomic thing is because if every school district did that, then no school district could do that.
Mhm.
So, and you had just opened the conversation of one school district recruiting teachers from another school district. We are absolutely in that time. And so what we're doing is we're finding ways to create a talent pool, as Robyn said. But the interesting thing is the competitive advantage that a school district has, one more time, is based on its initiative.
Mhm.
And so if you ask us about our preschool education program, absolutely, we're making the most of it. We're growing as fast as we possibly can. But we're doing that based on a level of initiative that many other school districts are following.
Yeah.
But I don't know that if every school district did that
You don't have the competitive advantage yet.
anymore.
Right.
Correct.
And, the notion of we are in the middle of negotiations right now, but so we're looking at areas to grow the pipeline. We've got exceptional teacher assistants in Lawrence Township. What ways can we incentivize them to go back to school to get their teaching degrees or to go alternate route? And our HR director is phenomenal, and he will sit and have those conversations about the different pathways, right? Whether it's let's go emergency cert, let's go alternate route. There's definitely, some latitude within the pool that we have. We have the talent in Lawrence Township. So we're looking at growing the pipeline, but also developing the people from within. What are your hopes and dreams? You look like somebody that should have their own classroom. So we're having those conversations too. I think it's an all hands on deck. Our principals are amazing. We're constantly leading and shaping. And I think, it goes beyond the dollars and cents of it.
Absolutely.
Tom is constantly in tune to the needs and how we're going to get there.
Yeah, our greatest resource is not dollars. Our greatest resource is the time that we have.
Yeah.
And if a student in a 6.5-hour day has 4.5 hours that they're available mentally to take in the instruction, then our greatest resource is 4.5 hours of that student time.
Mhm.
And how do we fill that student time? That's the real resource.
Wow. Great stuff. We've been talking about your end, the spending end. There's revenue from the state. One of the things that you have to gauge is the state aid that you may or may not get. How do you estimate that?
That didn't sound very positive. So
Well,
let's put another spin on that, Ray.
Well, no, you'll get state aid. But I know, like last year, some people were surprised. It was more than they thought or less than they thought.
Yeah.
And that means you kind of have to go back to the drawing board a little bit.
Mhm.
How do you try to estimate that to make it easier on the whole school district? Because you'll be getting those numbers relatively soon.
Sure. We always plan for flat. When we do our base budget, we take the whole program, and we mean program, I mean support, direct instruction, everything, move it forward 1 year and with known costs to the extent that we have them. And then we anticipate flat state aid and we build around that. But of course, we always have a contingency plan in the background because we're always budgeting. And we always say, well, we try to look in the positive, as me poking fun at you with state aid. But the truth of the matter is we have to be ready for when it's not positive.
Mm-hmm.
And so the strategies that we have, sometimes they need to be deployed, or some part of that strategy needs to be deployed and not the whole strategy. And so we had that conversation today. We had a leadership council meeting with our principals this morning. we were very positive. And that's one of the things that I'd like to emphasize more than
Yes.
anything is whatever is going to come our way, whatever that may look like, every educator, every administrator out there knows that when push comes to shove, come September 6th or whatever it is next year, the school doors will open, the students will arrive, and we're going to lead through anything that we have to manage. So let's take that type of attitude on now and assure our folks that we're going to find a way to make it work.
Yeah.
We will lead through it.
Yeah, we do.
And yep, there might be some backroom complaining, but our responsibility is to lead through it. And if there's any complaining between the two of us, we keep each other up. We'll look at it, see it for what it is, and say, okay, where are we going now?
Yeah.
And we move forward.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, though, you first have to manage your expectations amongst all of us. We're not responsible for a 2% cap. And you've done the math in this conversation, and we have to manage our way around that. That's a difficult process. So our communications with our board is to manage their expectations, never surprise anything with that to them or give them any surprises, excuse me, is what I'm trying to say. And when we do that, we're able to confidently move forward with our board on our strategic plan, and they understand that we need to make bold moves sometimes, like opening up our PEA classrooms and then doubling their size in the subsequent year. And they walk with us through being bold and leading forward and letting our kids and our parents know that we're going to make this work. It's going to be okay. And that's where we are. And in my time together with Robyn and previous leaders, that has always been true, always. And so it'll be true tomorrow too.
All right, because we're kind of ending where we started in terms of communication is really key in all this. I have a couple of questions on that. Hey, I said it before. This is the second week of January.
Yes.
And board members just got sworn in. A lot of new board members. They haven't been there for any of those October, November, December conversations. They probably don't even know that you were having those conversations. So if you're a new board member, what advice would you give them to feel comfortable, not just in your district,
Sure.
any district, how do,
I think just give yourself the space and grace to sit back and listen and learn. We have one of our board members that's coming up on her year anniversary, and she just said something the other day that really resonated. Like, you know what, I wanted to jump in and I wanted to feel like I was a contributor. But what you realize over time is it's okay to sit back, take your school board's trainings, lean into the committee conversations, even if it means that you're sitting back quiet. That doesn't mean that you're not going to be a contributor. It means you're setting yourself up to be in a better space so that when you do contribute, it's meaningful. So I think my best advice is, first of all, we offer a lot of time with new board members. As a central office team, we sort of introduce them around. We get them their feet wet with a board manual that we've been working on putting together that just sort of lays out the logistics of how we do things in Lawrence, right? They go through their board member trainings and they have questions, and it's really the availability. It truly is the open door policy with all of us. And I think that helps them to feel included right from the gate. Our board president, again, and our vice president, they make themselves available to sort of, give a little bit of some lessons learned conversations. And that might be before committees, after committees. I think the key is nobody's going to know everything overnight. It's like being a first teacher. Think about a first-year teacher and a 15-year veteran. We have some board members that have served on this board for a number of years, coming up on 2 decades. You cannot compare that knowledge base to somebody brand new starting out. And there's an adjustment period. What's my new behavior like at the dais? What conversations am I now allowed to have and not have in the community? So I think we sort of walk and talk through scenarios as they arise, and we make them teachable moments for our new board members. And there's no judgment, and no question is a bad question, but I think we all work to set the stage for that.
Now, oftentimes board members do have questions on bills and board items, on budget items. How do you like those questions? Like you mentioned it, sometimes the board meeting may not be the best time to bring up the question for the first time.
Right.
It might be better is it better to give the superintendent or BA, depending on the question, a call the board president?
That is always
board member has to-
appreciated. I mean, the great thing is that when the committee minutes come out, it goes to the full board. So we sort of know in advance, what has transpired at that committee meeting. That's your opportunity window before the live board meeting to really ask questions, to make the phone calls. And that is absolutely encouraged by the board president. It's something that we honor and has been best practice here in Lawrence Township. The first time at a board meeting may not be the best time to question the bills list. That would be something that, depending on the department that was doing the spending, should be directed to. And I think it's always been a clean process being handled that way.
I think if you're going to, for the board members and for the BAs, I think you have to advocate for that process yourself and ask.
Mhm.
So when Robyn first arrived in Lawrence, I would say, how do you want to manage this?
Mhm.
So, and she said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, here's some ways we've done it in the past. What do you feel most comfortable with? And then she chose a hybrid of that, and she proposed it to the board, essentially saying, here's some ideas for you. How do you feel about it? Because it's a deliberate thing that you do when you set up a communication chain. And you have to ask those questions, especially if someone asks me, a board member asks me about the budget. Now is not the time for me to figure out what I'm going to do. I want to give you the answer, but I have to be mindful that maybe I want to answer that question to everyone. Maybe I want to answer that question to the superintendent first before I answer it to everyone. And these are the things that we have to think through, because these are your tripping hazards. We all want to answer the question because we want to satisfy that person's needs, because we're in the business of education. And so when an individual asks us a question, we want them to succeed with the answer. But we also have to be mindful of what that does through the organization. And so I think one of the questions that comes up, is there a right way and a wrong way to have that, to use that chain? The right way is to ask the question, how would you like to proceed?
Right.
Start there.
Just to add to that, we have started to bring back into practice the work session piece of the agenda.
Mhm.
Oh, yes.
So that tends to be, it's an opportunity, right?
ask
There's the board
questions.
work
Exceptional.
session where we have thought to ourselves in committee, this would be good for the full board to hear. So we established a little work session, whether it is a deeper dive on a budget question. When we were going out for the preschool expansion aid, we utilized that time. Sometimes there's great curricular decisions that we want the full board and the public to hear. So we've done hands-on work sessions where our teachers have come up and taught the board some lessons or like a little mini lesson to expose them to the good work that's happening in our schools.
So you're giving an example of what is actually happening in the class.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. And that has helped to shape the board members' mindset in when they are voting on something on the agenda. If there is a question, they have seen it, they have listened to it, they've had teachers present to them. We have found, and they've experienced it.
They
And
give demonstrations.
We adopted Orton Gillingham IMSC for our tier 1 instruction. We had the sand trays out, the board members played, we did a summer workshop. I think it's important, and we always kind of poll them, like, what is it that you feel like you need from us? And when they want those experiences, we're happy to provide it, and our teachers are brilliant. So we're also happy to showcase our programs. And I think that has helped them to feel more connected to the decisions at the dais.
Yeah, it's not just something that they
Correct.
voted on a piece
They're
of
not just
paper.
rubber
They see
stamping
something
it.
that they've seen.
Correct.
Okay.
They've
That has been-
experienced.
And
That's actually been
Yeah.
something that we're bringing back more into our daily practice, into our board meeting practice.
Okay, we've actually run a little over time, but
Okay.
that's
All right.
fine.
Sorry.
No, because I think like I said before, it comes back to communication. You call it a communication channel,
Chain.
right?
Channel, chain. Sure.
Chain. It's actually a decision chain too.
Sure.
It is.
How you get to your decisions is how you communicate
Sure.
with each other. So I commend you for all that communication that you do at the
Thank you.
district level and the board level. So that brings us to the end of this Education Matters. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, ask your business administrator and superintendent.
Thank you.
Thank you.